course we are.
I know, right?
Sorry.
It's okay. You're lucky I'm not right-handed, so
I'm left-handed too, so.
Yeah, right's right. Okay. Yeah, well, I think we're ready to go. Justin, you have them all set? All right.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Abington Heights School Board meeting of Wednesday, November 15th. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag?
Now over here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me just get a can of spray paint.
Yeah.
Mrs. O'Day, would you do roll call, please?
Mr. Abdullah,
Here.
Mr. Azar,
Here.
Mr. Fleming,
Here.
Mrs. Henderson,
Here.
Mrs. Karam,
Here.
Mr. Medensky,
Here.
Mr. Robeson,
Here.
Mrs. Tierney.
Nikki, can you hear?
Mickey?
Okay. Mr. Acker,
Here.
all present.
May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Mrs. Tierney?
Okay. Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you very much. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meetings, which were October 18th and November 1st?
So moved.
Second. Questions on the minutes? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney, Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Are there any board reports from committees? Mrs. Henderson?
Hello. I have the curriculum committee meeting. We met back on November 1st. The first thing we spoke about was our comprehensive plan. Goal number 1, we talked about the math curriculum development implementation. They're making progress. The professional development for K-6 and special ed K-12 has been ongoing. Coaching began yesterday. Each teacher will receive 5 coaching sessions, focusing on error analysis and instructional planning based on student work and progress. Comprehensive goal number 2, science curriculum writing, grades 1 through 5. They met on the 18th of October to start the process. They met again on November 8th to continue the writing, with looking at grade level writing for science, looking at the science curriculum that they're currently doing, looking at the different programs, and how that connects to the current STEM program. Grades 6 through 12, they're going to be using 4 different PD days to develop the curriculum framework for secondary. Then third focus is comprehensive plan for goal number 3, which focuses on our school climate. One of the main components that we're focusing on is school counseling, looking for different ways for emotional regulation, helping kids to build resiliency, helping them deal and manage their emotions and stress levels, looking at different ways to have an approach that's more proactive instead of reactive. We're also looking at ways to kind of repackage PBIS. They relaunched it at the middle school, came up with some new and different things to kind of rally the troops and have some excitement around the program. It's going to be implemented at the high school level, began rolling out looking at different ways to roll out the program. One thing that we're looking at is having a PBIS committee chair, kind of like a grade level leader or a department chair to kind of help facilitate that program. Another thing that we're always looking for ways to support students and families. One of the things that we recently did was the workshop for parents on digital safety. I believe in the spring, correct me if I'm wrong, we had about 9 or 10 families attend. Dr. Vitale did a phenomenal job putting that together. She and I had some conversations about what might help make it easier for parents to attend those sort of things. I reached out to some people in the community, and the feedback that we got was helping to provide some refreshments and food since it was over dinner time and childcare. So Dr. Vitale took that feedback, and we ended up also getting some donations from local businesses for raffles, and we ended up having around 70 people attend the digital safety meeting on Monday. So for those of you that attended that, Dr. Vitale did send out a survey, so please take a few minutes to fill that out. One of the things in there is looking at other workshops that we can do. We'd like to move to having family workshops or parent workshops once a month. So the information that you can give us through that survey would be super helpful. All right, next thing was, we talked about the grade level leaders update. Each grade level now has a grade level leader that they're meeting. They hold their own meetings with their teams. They're kind of looking at what's going well, what's not going well, what they can do to better support their students. Also looking at a new universal screener for K-8 in reading. And one of the focuses was differentiating instruction for students at the elementary level. We are doing small group math instruction and small group reading instruction. Middle school is looking at the Comet Express period to help give some students enrichment type stuff and to help those struggling learners. And in 9th grade, if students are struggling, they will meet with their teachers during 9th mod. Another thing that is being looked at is the use of artificial intelligence. On November 9th, the student committee met, teacher committee meeting was the 13th, and there will be a parent meeting on December 13th, February 13th, and April 11th to kind of look at how artificial intelligence is being used, how can it enhance learning, and how is it kind of hindering or, interfering with submitting work, plagiarism, all that kind of stuff. But that's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any other board reports? Okay, in that particular case, we're up to our student representatives, Mr. McVetti and Mr. Lamb. You're on.
So on Friday, November 3rd, our girls tennis took 3 representatives to the PIAA state championships at Hershey Racket Club, where Susan Arp competed in singles and Mary Booth and Sona Hanamali competed in doubles. Neither were able to advance, but they are the reigning District 2 champions. Friday night, our boys soccer team, which is 17-3, defeated Wyoming Valley West to secure back-to-back District 2 championship wins. In doing so, they earned the right to host the first round of the PIAA Class 4A championship tournament on November 9th. The game remained tied until the 8-minute mark, and our boys ultimately fell. They lost 0-2. The football team secured a return to the District 2 5A championship for the first time since 2016. The boys traveled to Delaware Valley on Friday, November 10th, but lost in the championship round. They are the District 2 runners-up. On Saturday, November 4th, the girls cross-country team had their race at Hershey for the PIAA 3A state championship. They finished second in the state as runners-up. This is the highest place finish for the girls' age cross-country in its program's history. It is also the highest District 2 AAA finish in state history. Congrats to all the members on the team. We would also like to wish the team good luck as they tackle Nike Cross Country Regionals on Saturday, November 25th, where they will attempt to qualify for Nationals in Oregon. Our local fire and police departments helped us welcome the team back into town with an escort back to the high school. They were also acknowledged by the community during the halftime at the girls' district championship game. We also had the girls' volleyball and field field hockey team both end their season in the semifinal round of district playoffs. The junior high boys were league champions, along with the junior high girls and the freshman football team. At the 3A league meet championship for the junior high boys cross country and the junior high girls cross country, they were the winners. They were the winners also. The junior high football team finished 4-3-1 overall. On Wednesday, November 8th, it was National Signing Day, and we had several student athletes, along with families and friends, joined us in the main gym to officially sign their NLI contract to commit as a scholarship athlete. These athletes were Jake Lenahan for baseball at the College of Holy Cross, Maggie Ratchford at St. Francis University for soccer, Callie Yanko for lacrosse at St. Francis University, Madison Zaleski for field hockey at Old Dominion, Peyton Paulman for field hockey at Central Michigan, Haley Hertz with the track and cross country team at IUP, Kaylin Elliott with the field hockey team at Bloomsburg University, and Caleb Marzolino with wrestling at Indiana University. The girls soccer team won their District 2 championship, beating Crestwood 8-2. They are also are at the PIAA 3A tournament. After winning 2 of their games, they are proceeding to the state championship the state championship soccer game, which is going to be held this Saturday at Eagle View Middle School in Mechanicsburg. They will face District 7 runner-up Moon Area Tigers, who are 18-2-2, who were last year's PIAA state championships. The Lady Comets became the first Lackawanna Interscholastic Athletic Association girls team to make it to the PIAA soccer final. It is the best run they have had in the program's history. And that's it.
Moving on to the things going on in the high school. In terms of academics, Rose Peters is a national semifinalist for the prestigious Coca-Cola Scholarship. Angela Zhang is a national merit scholar. Teachers have started the groundwork for PBIS implementation for the 2024-25 school year, and AP exam registration deadline was on 11/9. However, late exams are still available in the guidance office, but it will incur a $40 late fee. In terms of co-curriculars, fall sports are still wrapping up, but several of our teams are still in playoffs. College visits have been happening in the high school. The college fair was on November 1st, and the Wellness Expo was on November 3rd. Workforce Summit and Career Fair signups and guidance are due by December 15th. For parents, teachers will be communicating with students that are in danger of failing the quarter. Please mark your calendar for conferences on November 27th from 1 through 5 and 6:15 through 8:15 to meet with teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. That's great. Dr. Schaefer, I have a quick question. I see you have KCBA's presentation next. Do you want to have your comments before that?
Yeah, let's do the public comment first.
You wanted, I thought we would have. I was referring to your particular
My
comments.
comments. You know, it's, so, yes, let's do that. I'll just segue into that presentation.
Okay.
All right. Mike, you're going to be ready, right? You're all ready? Okay. Before we begin tonight's presentations by KCBA, our architectural firm, and PFM, our municipal financial managers, I want to take a moment to set some context, make sure that we have a shared understanding of where we've been and where we are headed. As a quick reminder, back in March of 2022, we started the process of evaluating all of our facilities. It was a really big task. We engaged in a RFP through our facilities committee, where we accepted proposals, interviewed various architectural firms to make sure that their skill sets and knowledge align with the needs of our community. Simultaneously, we engaged the community in surveys of our parents, our students, and our teachers to get an idea of what their needs are and what their perceptions of our facilities were. We had community feedback presentations in our buildings where we took the opportunity to take a look at the feedback from our architects' results from the facility study. We had our facilities committee and our extracurricular committee, as well as help from the state police to inform a short-term needs project that was funded for $1 million. And as you traverse around the district, you'll notice several enhancements, particularly in the area of safety, that are occurring or have occurred. So all of this has happened since March of 2020. And here we are now, and I told the board it's like akin to writing a dissertation. At first you have these really big ideas, and over time you start to refine those ideas until you come up with some very strategic questions that you want to answer. We started out this project with seemingly $1 billion worth of work that needed to be done across 660,000 square feet of buildings and acres upon acres of fields. We also, in addition to having those questions about the money in the fields, started to say, well, what's actually feasible? What are we looking at? And we came down to, we're looking at Abington Heights in 2050, and what might our needs be? So we're at a point now where we are looking at 3 to 4 projects, and certainly there could be many more, but 3 to 4 projects, as well as what types of funding, what types of lending might we be able to reasonably expect to address some of these. And this is a first step. But the board will endeavor to make a decision by March 20th of 2024 on the direction that we will be going. The first stage of many stages. That means that in January and February, we're going to be having public meetings in our various schools to discuss some of the projects, to hear from our families, to hear from our communities. And I've provided you with this context because this has been a long and deliberate approach. And when we make decisions in March, realize that whatever decisions we make, we're still 2 years out from putting a shovel in the ground, and 3 and 4 years out from seeing a project completed. So there is a lot of lead time that needs to occur. And that lead time will provide us a lot of opportunities for additional feedback from our community. So Mike from KCBA is going to start us off, and we've met Mike before, Mike Kelly, and he has provided us many presentations, and every time he finishes, I provide him feedback from the board. And the latest feedback that I provided Mike after a board retreat is there another option at the middle school? A school with the most needs according to the facility index. Is there an option at the middle school that would be more affordable, that still aligns to our needs, and perhaps would be stage 1 of a multi-stage project? And that is what Mike's going to talk about today. He has all the renderings with him. So he's going to talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about the context, and then we'll be free to ask questions. You wanna do that after PFM? Or,
I think that would be up,
okay.
probably
Well,
after
Mike.
Mike is done, and then have PFM,
Yep.
and then ask questions.
So we'll be able to ask, feel free to shoot away at Mike. And then we're going to bring PFM up, and they're going to talk about some various borrowing scenarios, okay? Prior to this, we talked a lot about different scenarios with PFM, and as we started to work through those, some of them were just untenable, so I took those off. So now we're down to a couple options to pontificate and throw darts at and ask a lot of questions. So Mike, you're up.
Thank you. Good to see you all again this evening. I'll be maybe the first to wish you a happy holiday season as we're diving into the middle of November here and getting ready for the holidays. And as Dr. Schaefer had said, this was just a quick update on some things that we've talked about over the last year, moving into that and ahead of some planned additional meetings and things for next year. So very quick, I have a whole bunch of stuff, or we could just stop after the first 6 slides. It's completely up to you guys. Just a quick reminder, as Dr. Shaver had mentioned, we did this whole entire facilities conditions index. We walked through every building. We took a look at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, inside, outside, all kinds of different things in all the buildings. And what we found, as he had mentioned, was that the middle school was the one building of all that had the most needs. And in particular, the interior of that building. We talked a lot about the kind of half-circle area of that school and the kind of the inflexibility that it has. When we studied just the size of it, it's very undersized for the amount of students that are currently in that building as well. So that building just wants to expand, first of all, in any type of a renovation idea. We also explored a new building idea on that campus as well. So that was kind of the matrix we used to begin a lot of the decisions and a lot of the options that we had considered. So 2 kind of big option slides. There was an option for a new middle school. You knock down the old one, build a new one. That was obviously the most expensive option. There's an option to renovate and expand. That was where we build essentially a 5th and 6th grade wing with a gym addition, and then renovate everything behind it. The half circle, the cafeteria, and all of those other pieces. As Dr. Shaver had mentioned, he said, well, isn't there a middle ground? And we said, well, we could build the 5th and 6th grade wing with the addition and not renovate anything. That would certainly be less. There's a lot of needs in that existing building to renovate, but you could start with that wing. What that would do is provide every 5th and 6th grader and the student a brand new space, brand new entrance to the middle school. The gym addition, what we found would actually be the largest gym in the district if we built a gym at that size. All of those things would be terrific. And then in the half circle area where now all 4 grades are, 7th and 8th grade has a little bit more room to expand. You could fix a few things up over time, maybe knock a few walls down to make things a little bit bigger in lieu of doing a larger renovation. But it at least right sizes the building and gets the 5th and 6th grade kids in an area on their own. The interesting idea of that, and we can kind of show a quick sketch of that later, that could be the first, let's say, third of a new middle school. If that building is built as kind of an L with a gym on it, you could come back 5, 10, 15 years later and build the rest of the school off of the gym. So that could be a 5th and 6th grade wing, then and the gym, you have another gym and a cafeteria, and then you build the 7th and 8th grade wing. That 5-6 wing could also be a 4-5 wing with a gym, you add another gym and a cafeteria, and build a 6, 7, and 8 middle school. So it's a little bit of a hybrid to look at it and say, just building the new construction portion of what we talked about last time helps that building immediately, helps that building in the future. If you renovate the rest of it, it could also be the beginning of a completely new building when the money and the time is available, and then essentially you just kind of knock down the rest of the school behind it. So that was that kind of middle ground idea, and obviously between 114 million for a new building and 80 to renovate, 38 is less. It would be essentially 38 million out of the 81. So you're building all the good fun stuff first, and we're kind of skipping all the messy. But again, it kind of gives you that ability to do the messy later, or go in another direction and essentially build the other, let's say, 2/3 of a middle school after that. So that was kind of an interesting thought and idea, but obviously a lot of conversations at the middle school. Then the other, we'll call them 3 projects or 2 buildings that we talked about was a small addition and renovation at Waverly. Waverly is your oldest elementary school. That main part of it is over 100 years old now. It's not air conditioned, so again, a second floor environment is going to be a little hotter than a first floor environment in an unair conditioned building. And possibly building that little addition, point to it there, a little addition in the front provides us a secure front entrance. It's a little strange that we would be building offices, but in building offices, it allows us to take the old offices and turn those into library and STEM spaces. Then you go upstairs and take the library that's there, used to be 2 classrooms, revert them back to 2 classrooms, and now we've got some more capacity at that school as well. So being kind of your smallest, oldest, and also unair conditioned building, that seemed to make some sense for, we'll call it a small project, albeit $14 million renovation and addition at Waverly. And then the 2 high school projects we talked about was a STEM addition. This is that little piece, and again, we can get into all of this if you want to see things further. Kind of connecting the back of the school, that's a big 2-story building, providing, I think, 8 to 10 additional classrooms, all based on science and technology, as well as the opportunity to renovate the library and that kind of family consumer science space along the main corridor as well. So there could be an addition scheme at 14, or it could be the addition and the renovation, which would be closer to 20, or it could just be the renovation at between 4 and 5. So there were a couple of different options there at the high school. When we look to start planning these things, and that's where PFM is going to come in and talk about, because everybody wants to do everything right away, but obviously money comes into factor. So the planning of the building is just as important as the planning of financial spending. As Dr. Schaefer had said, from the word go, everything takes at least a year in order to document, to do all the drawings for bidding, to do all the permits and approvals and things from the state and county. So there's kind of a design year, whenever that year is. And then Waverly is probably about 1.5 years of time to build versus the middle school, which could be 2.5 years, or maybe even longer if we do the renovation portion. We talked about 2024 being, at least in the first 2 or 3 months there, the time for public input and discussion. The big borrowing time usually occurs when construction starts. As you would expect in any type of construction project, the actual construction is the high majority, 95% of that cost is as the building, as it should be. So the borrowing, that money needs to be on hand when you put a shovel in the ground. So if that started in 2027, you may do a borrowing the end of the year of 26, then borrow again in 27, borrow again in 28. You could back that up a year. Maybe we just start with Waverly and the high school, start planning for that at the end of next year, document over 25, start to borrow some money at the end of 25 into 26. So this is where PFM really can come in and say, hey, you could do everything at once, or we really need to spread things out. Do we do the big project first or the big project last? All of that comes into financial planning on available borrowing and all kinds of very smart guy things around financial parts that I don't fully understand. But this is kind of the debate or the calendar. There's 15 other decisions that could be, or varieties of that as well. It really comes down to priorities of the district and certainly financial planning. So that's the quick version. I think the only thing with the middle school was to show that was the new building. So the idea here is building the addition. You could always, this is that little blue thing coming up, that could be the remaining 2/3 of a middle school built in the future. So this is that little addition. then you could renovate, or you build all of this, and of course, there's 100 different shapes it could be, and then take that down. But what's nice is we're confident that that new building, just even the 5-6 wing and the gym, has options for the future as well. Any questions on that, or any of the, certainly things that we talked about in the past? Sure.
First of all, thanks a lot. This was very helpful. When you look at a phase approach or a stage approach for different options, whether it be, spending more of the resources toward the middle school addition, the Waverly addition, and the high school STEM and renovation, with each of those things, isn't there like a certain setup cost that if you did, let's say, the school new flat out, that startup cost would be less over time than doing a little bit, then stopping, then do a little bit, and then stopping, and then doing a little bit and stopping. So even though the number is lower, we're probably spending more time in pure setup costs if we do that, and we're getting much less.
Yeah, I mean, the absolutes are, every year it gets more expensive. The slower you do it, the more expensive it is. To your point, the more phases you do it in, the more it costs collectively over time. But not everyone has, $200 million that they can just write a check to and say, go. So again, that's where it gets into the financial planning of that. If the middle school, which had seemed to be a priority, is also your most expensive option, is there a middle ground? Not to say $40 million isn't a big investment, it is, but we can say, all right, at 40 or 38, I think is what we were saying, for that 5-6 wing, that's the beginning. And if we take 40 at the middle school and 20 at the high school and 15 at Waverly, and that number is $75 million over 5, 6, 7 years, is that something that's achievable? Those are big projects, huge implications, immense improvements at 3 buildings. Great. Could you do that quicker? Sure. But, again, are you able to do that financially? The longer it takes, the more it costs. The longer you put things off, the more expensive it becomes. The numbers we're sharing are kind of saying that we would be documenting those next year and starting construction in 25. And we're already looking at calendars for starting construction in 26 or 27. So if that's the direction, we can come back and say, okay, in 2027, here's where that number we think would be based on traditional inflation. But, everybody's been shocked over the last 2 or 3 years. Just, the typical 4% inflation became 20 and kind of blew everybody out of the water. So the numbers we're sharing at, say, 75 is thinking about those projects starting over the next year or two. If that happened in 3 or 4 years, okay. But now all of those things got a little more expensive.
All right, thanks.
Go ahead, Rod.
Mr. Azar.
So have you seen this done before, where you actually build like half a school and leave the remaining completely unrenovated for a while, and then somebody follows up years later? Are we breaking new ground by doing this, or has somebody else done this?
I'm sure someone else has done it. We studied it at Wissahickon High School, and then they just built a giant pool instead of doing anything with their building. We've at Wilson area in Easton, we kind of grabbed their old pool and gym from their existing middle school and then built an entire middle school connected to that piece, and then came back later and renovated that section. But you were building the primarily the educational spaces involved in that. There's really only 2 spots where this proposed addition touches the old building. We would build that in a way we would have to, where they would be fire separated, meaning technically one building could catch fire and burn down and the other one wouldn't move. So the way we would have to construct that by code would actually help if you chose to someday come back. You wouldn't burn it down, but knock it down. And in those 2 areas, you just fill in that hallway with a room or a closet. It is certainly very feasible to do. And we've been a part of buildings that were additions that we're planning for future additions and things like that. Doing it at this scale would be fun, but certainly something that's, I would say, practical and very feasible to do.
And did your estimates up there assume literally nothing is done to the original building, or is
think
there
we
any
put-
light renovation that's done there?
So the new addition has the new administration. So the old administration across from the cafeteria, we have money in there to make those classrooms or something like that, which I think was part of the renovation anyway.
A library.
Yes, so there's a new library as part of the addition as well. But there's not a lot of money to go into, and, we were showing, all the pictures before of taking the half circle and making those hard classrooms. The problem with the half circle as well is it's not insulated, the windows are old, that's not part of that. So that can be done, but that's where it gets into a debate of, even if you had the money, do you spend 80 million on renovating it or 115 in replacing it? Where's the better dollar spent? So yeah, in that scenario of the 38, very minimal cost. Anything that we're touching, those 2 points, and then really the administration moving out, we could make 2 new classrooms there, but for all intents and purposes, nothing after that.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Mr. Tierney?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike, a couple questions. First one is, space. I need to feel confident that, with all these renovations, that all of our buildings, which will be housing still 4 grades, will, be substantially, enough to house, in 2050, all of the kids that we will be having in our district. Are we building more space or putting in new facilities?
Every one of those 3 projects adds more educational space to your buildings. You are growing in enrollment, not rapidly, but you're growing. It's also good to know you're not shrinking. So whatever capacity issue that you have at the middle school is not going away, and if anything, you're adding more kids to that. So again, one of the first things we saw when we looked at the existing middle school was how undersized it was for the students that you have now. We talked about a national average at about 180 square feet per kid, and you're at about 120 at the middle school. So it's a very small building for the amount of students you have there now. So adding this wing or any space onto that middle school helps alleviate that overcrowding and certainly accommodates any new students that may be coming. Waverly, we're adding essentially 2 new classrooms too as part of adding the administration area. At the high school, the STEM renovation is adding some classrooms, and certainly the STEM addition was adding additional classrooms. So all of those are adding more space for current students and the assumed additional students to come.
Right, and to that point, and really expanding on that is, if you can throw up that middle school one that you were looking at with the L, that mock-up right there. So yes, right-sizing, or at least getting closer to right-sizing the middle school and thinking about size. This is the purgatory space that we talked about before. By pushing the admin out into the new building, that essentially becomes open space. And although we're not at that level of detail yet, what we talked about with Mike was, we could create more classrooms in there, right? It's not a ton of classrooms, but maybe we have some better life skills classrooms and some of the other special education spaces that we'd want to improve. When we talk about the STEM addition at the high school, not only are you coming into the 1990s, or, early 2000s, you are then freeing up 8 classrooms that used to be older science classrooms. With some light renovations, those become classrooms. And when we think about 2050, as Mickey was saying, the other question about enrollment is what programs, what careers are going to be around that we don't even know about? I mean, look, I always say I went to college without a cell phone, or or the internet. I would have never thought about that. but somebody back then that was developing a school had to be thinking about, we should probably have some swing space, something for that unknown. So we end
Yeah,
up with
yeah.
actually some more space.
Yeah, at the middle school,
I
though.
believe my bigger concerns are really K through 4. By spending, all of these funds, I think it's phenomenal for the 5th through 8th grader, phenomenal for the high schooler. But the K through 4, I am concerned. I would love to see an all-day kindergarten program, and I'm concerned that South Abington and Newton Ransom, are they going to be large enough to house a K through 4 all-day kindergarten program for the future?
So when we studied that before, you have 12 existing classes of half-day kindergarten, and there's 8 rooms. So you would essentially need at least 1, if not 2, additional rooms in every one of the buildings. A school like Newton Ransom has that. The other 3 did not. And they were, again, they needed extra space for special education and things like that. So allowing for that would be either would require more additions onto those buildings, or a scenario where you build this addition, and this is for a 4th and 5th grade addition, and then 5, 6, and 7, 8 stays in the half circle. That would be better than what they have now, but there's still 3 grades in a half circle is better than 4 grades in a half circle. But that could be considered an option as well, is build this as 4 or 5, then that alleviates some room in all of your elementary schools without building anything, and then, again, you have some space for either programs or, additional offerings as well. So all the more reason, again, that this space is needed to alleviate the overcrowding at the middle school, but you could consider it that way as a way to alleviate the overcrowding at the elementary school as well.
Basically, you're creating space that we will then have the opportunity in the future to make some decisions about.
Yes, this would be a lot less expensive than trying to build 6 classrooms additions at all of the schools. Waverly, we know we can't expand that big. Clark Summit is already your biggest one. South Abington, we talked about being in a floodplain, so maybe we don't want to expand that building. So you could expand here. You have space, and think of that as a 5-6 center or a 4-5 center. So it gives you options.
Yeah.
That then
Yeah,
gives us the option.
that would be a great opportunity, to give more space in the other elementary buildings. My second question is, during these renovations of the middle school, would you have to house the middle school students during the school year in a different facility?
So the thinking, in a scenario where this stays at a 5-8 building, you would build this addition and everybody stays where they are. When the building is done, you have 5th and 6th grade in their new 5th and 6th grade home. You could probably get a grade in one of those spaces as well, but there would probably be some modular classrooms for a year, just to make sure that we were keeping kids away from the rest of the building. Due to the amount we'd be ripping the facade off the half circle. That's not really something that can be done over a summer, or when kids are on the other side of that wall. So there would be a transition time where we may need, and we've worked that into the cost, you may need some temporary classroom trailers, and that happens a lot, just to keep kids away from where all that construction is.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other questions? Mr. Azar.
If you could go back to the Waverly drawings.
Sure, I'll fire through all this stuff just to get there, but this is what it all looks like. This is all the stuff. Hopefully Waverly's next and not the high school.
A lot of slides.
This was, I threw this in, Dr. Schaefer, you had talked about the gym there. So these are the 4 gyms that you have now, the 2 high school on the left and the 2 middle school on the right. 7,600 square feet for the high school gym. That's a little small. The auxiliary gym there at 67, the middle school. So your auxiliary gym at the high school and your middle school gym are about the same size. And then the ox gym at the middle school is very small. The one that we were proposing here in this space was about 10,000 square feet. So that would be a 2-station gym. You'd have the ability to run multiple games at once, seat about 900 spectators. So there was a little bit of a quick study on just gyms in general. So this was Waverly. The admin and the nurse wing here, and the idea of building a new admin and nurse out in front of the building. You'd have a secure vestibule here, some additional admin and learning support spaces for speech therapists and things like that at the front. But that moves these guys out of here, so we could move the library and the STEM room there, which allows you then upstairs to take the STEM and the library and turn that into 2 classrooms. So you're gaining 2 classrooms by building some offices, was the idea at Waverly.
So that was my question. So how much extra space, educational space, is being added by this renovation?
2 classrooms and, maybe an office or 2.
And then the rest of it is you're getting a new secure vestibule and you're upgrading?
Yes, and then we're upgrading the facility as well. So
Right.
part of that 14 and change was air conditioning, plumbing, ADA compliance,
Right.
A new electrical system. So the building's infrastructure is brand new again. It's just within a 100-year-old.
So that's all included in your
Yes.
estimate, is the HVAC and the ADA?
Yes.
Okay.
We kind of, which again could be broken out. You could just do the HVAC and nothing else, or you could just do the addition and not HVAC. We kind of look at these projects as, I want to tackle the issues at that building and then not have to think about it for 25 years. So this would be we don't have to think about this building now for 25 years
Right.
proposal.
Mrs. Henderson.
I like the layout of this, but I'm just wondering, is there any wiggle room to add a couple more classrooms? Like to
We
extend the
did.
addition?
We talked about this, our problem at Waverly is space.
Just bring it down a little bit more?
Right. Land that
But
we
in
own.
front of, like, where the blue space is,
Should say.
where that little plot of grass is,
So the area out front here is already paved. So one of the ways we think this would be achievable is that we can say, we're building impervious coverage, we're building a physical hard structure on top of existing hard material. We're not taking away any grass. We're doing this at under an acre, so we wouldn't have to go through state environmental planning and things like that. So being small helps, being placed on concrete helps. Outside of that, now you're building down into these fields or something like that, and now you're starting to expand a building that's
yeah.
already bigger than it probably is.
What about to
should
the
be.
left of where the yellow space is,
Going out
right there?
here?
Yeah.
We could add a room there, now you are on grass, but now you're also blocking this
Blocking,
guy's piece. This is the 1 story here, so this is the area here that's 2 stories, so it's nice if we were going to expand, I would try to come that way I could build a classroom or 2 twice on 2 floors.
On their
And
playground.
allow that hallway, let's go to the 2nd floor there.
It's a playground.
Here to expand, but that's playground space that's expanding. We can look to that. It costs more, and
Right.
now it's like, give a mouse a cookie, and now you're like, yeah, great, thanks. Can I also expand this way and this way and this way? And that would just be a conversation with the municipality to say how much further we could go to expand that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Carroll.
Did we, I jog my memory, did we discuss the courtyard? Are we closing that in? Are we not? I can't remember.
We're leaving it
If we
as is.
discussed it.
That could certainly be spruced up, but I don't know that to enclose it would be very expensive. We're doing a couple of those jobs now, actually. That would be very expensive, and I don't know what space would go in there, because as soon as you build something in there, you're blocking, again, the windows of these spaces, and it would all be internal anyway. So you'd be building a bunch of classrooms that don't have windows, and you're blocking existing rooms. So we've done some really nice courtyards where instead of grass, it was turf. Not the turf with like the little rubber balls, but still turf where there's drainage underneath. 5 minutes after it's done raining, it's dry, and kids can go outside there. So that could become more usable space. But I don't know that you would want to build anything inside of it just for expense and, again, just the practicality of building more rooms that don't have windows. But it's a nice idea to renovate it a little bit or include that as part of the upgrades of the building.
Yeah, it's a little underutilized.
Okay. I have 3 questions. from the time we started this project, and I'm just looking for what you're telling me tells you, how much did the costs of doing the work increase?
I'd say 20 to 25%,
So 20,
just in
20
2023.
Would you expect the same sort of increases?
I certainly hope not. It's been a moving target this year. Everything has gone up and gone up and gone up. 22, everything went up a lot, and we said, "Ooh, we're in 23, it'll slow down," and it didn't, and interest rates just kept going up. Now, the thought is the Fed's not going to raise interest rates this quarter, which is great, or coming up, but it hasn't gone down. We just bid a project in Northampton, an elementary school, and it seems like it leveled off, but it's still higher than a building we've ever seen before. So those are the numbers we're using, or the numbers that we just got a week ago, but it hasn't gone down. And 2023 was a kind of a skyrocketing year of construction costs.
So the costs are updated as best as you can make them at this point,
Mhm.
but certainly from a cost standpoint, time is of the essence.
It always gets more expensive. We just had this meeting with Panther Valley, is looking at a new elementary school. And we showed them a number based on what we thought it would be, and that was the number that it came in at. So it was like, good news, bad news. It's not more than what we said, but it's not less than what we said. And that's hard, because that's still more than it's been 5 years ago or even 2 years ago. But that's kind of, the landscape we're in, and PFM will obviously talk about that on the financial end.
I know from a public comment standpoint, there's been a lot of complaints and discussion about traffic flow at each of the schools.
Mhm.
These plans include working on the traffic flow to try and ameliorate the bad situations we have as best
So
as
there's a
possible.
couple different conversations about that as well. At the middle school, if we go all the way back, we did talk about building a road, I don't know if I came down enough, here, that you would come in this way, come around, you could build a road there that would take you over and connect to this entrance drive, heading up to Newton Ramsden. Waverly, there's really, again, nothing that we would propose there, because there's just not enough room for anything. At the high school, there was an idea of cutting a road across right by the athletic building, and I forget the name of that road there.
Is
but-
that the gravel pond in the back?
Yeah, gravel pump.
Right. That would improve things, which could certainly be included in those projects. Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of a layout would help traffic just by creating this parking lot. So if you built the addition and we didn't do anything else, this stayed, just having this larger parking lot there and allowing traffic to split, we're trying to get the cars off the state road, because right now they have to wait. Once the buses are done, then you can come on the site, which makes sense, but it'd be nice if we had a larger space that we could get all those cars off the road and allow them to queue around something larger than what you have now. That way they could be separated. So there would be some improvements, at least at the middle school.
But at this point, the cost of doing that really is not included in these numbers.
In the middle school, it would be. So you would have the larger parking lot to the side. We would make that long enough and shape it. And since we presented that before, we've talked about how this building could be the beginning of the next phase. So we would plan that out. Just do a little schematic plan. Go, all right, if we were going to add 2 more grades or 3 more grades, here's the layout of what that would look like. So let's make the parking lot, move those fields down a little bit so it stays out of the way. So we could build that parking lot knowing that parking lot could always just stretch a little more if we built a larger building someday. Make sure we don't build something that we have to take away if phase 2 occurred. But at the middle school, that added road there, and if we said yes, absolutely, we need to provide that secondary access road over to the entrance drive to Newton Ramsden. Okay, that's just maybe one thing less that we get someplace else, or we can look at that as a cost and say, if that's our budget and we're staying there, but we want this added road, then maybe the gym gets a little smaller, or we do something a little less, someplace else. So we could still work that in at the middle school.
Thank you. I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. what you're talking about here is only work on those 3 schools, nothing on the other schools.
That's what we are showing there. I think the reason for that were those were the 3 buildings that kind of rose to the top in the study. Again, the middle school has the most needs. Waverly is a oldest elementary school that isn't air conditioned. The other ones aren't either. But that one's the oldest, and it's 2 stories, and it gets pretty hot upstairs.
If we somehow, everything went our way or whatever, and we suddenly had more borrowing capacity or whatever, and could look at something beyond these, what would be the 4th area you'd look at?
Clark Summit is your biggest elementary school that is also not air conditioned. There's some secure entry vestibule in the front that we talked a little bit about there. So that would be my next choice, just because it's large, it's not going anywhere, it's got good bones, but needs a little bit of service. Newton Ramsden is fine too. It's just smaller. We talked about, do you build an addition across or something like that? But that building, again, doesn't have as many needs as Clark Summit. And then, there's South Abington, which was one that we chose to say, hey, that has a lot of needs, but it's in an area where I don't know that you want to invest a lot of money over time, long term, in that space because of the flooding issues. I'd rather you spend money someplace else. We talked, is that a 4 or 5 addition that then becomes something else? You could build that and think of that building as a 4-8. Here's our elementary school component. It's really isolated. You walk by them to go to the 6, 7, 8 portion of the middle school, and that moved 4th grade out. And what does that mean for other buildings and things like that? So there's a lot of options here. Long-term investment, that makes sense, versus South Abington is throwing $10, $20 million into renovating that or even expanding that. That may be a space that you might consider, hey, this is great, let's keep it going, let's keep it fresh, let's keep it alive and functioning, but that may not be the one to sink a lot of money into.
Mr. Azar?
Just one follow-up question. So there's no magic around the addition being 5-6, right? It could be 7-8 also. Is it designed specifically for
absolutely
certain grades?
We're showing this as a double-loaded corridor full of classrooms. That, to me, is a little more elementary than it is secondary, because secondary, you're going to start moving around. You're going to have STEM spaces. You want kids working outside of the classroom. There's a little bit more collaborative, more freedom, if you will, in some of the movements of a secondary school, like a middle school. That's kind of the design of what we were showing for these spaces in the half circle was spaces where we were creating common spaces and areas where students could kind of work outside the classroom, bigger science labs and stuff like that. So yes, you could have 7th and 8th grade in that wing, but those rooms they're more like older traditional classrooms, which is a little bit more prevalent for primary education, where you're going to Mrs. Jones's class and I'm there 80% of the day.
You're saying the way you have it designed is more like
Yes.
that, right? So,
Yeah.
well, this is an open question. My impression of the Half Moon is, and I have 3 kids that have recently been there, is the hallways are narrow, it's crowded.
Mhm.
The kids have to move around because it's 7th and 8th grade.
Right.
It seems to me like if you're going to use that space going forward, it would be more suitable for kids that don't move as much.
Yeah. Yeah. If you went that way, you'd still be building rooms. The questions would be the special science and other things like that. If we have the specialty rooms in the back, and that's all STEM and music and art, maybe these 2 rooms here are science labs on the 1st and 2nd floor. You could look at that as, hey, I like the idea of this addition. I like the idea that it could become something in the future, but I'd rather it be secondary education focused, not primary education focused. Okay, we could look at that as well. And then the cost is right now based on square footage. So that would be, a secondary building should be larger because of the types of different types of education served in those spaces. But that's an option we could look at. If that's the 7-8 edition, and then it's 4, 5, 6 and the half moon,
Right.
you know, that could be an option as well.
Okay, thanks.
Is the auditorium big enough? It doesn't look like it's being renovated. Is it big enough to accommodate the increased population of the school?
So a lot of times in auditoriums now, they're, especially in a middle school, it's that space, you know, we would get rid of the walls, we would, you know, redo the stage, make that ADA compliant, put in better, you know, or newer chairs and things. But it's not necessarily the capacity, I don't think it is now, for the entire student body to go to. When you have student body assemblies, most of those are going to the gym. So in this scenario, regardless of what the addition is, with a large enough gym to sit, you know, 800 students, that's where your full-time pep rally or you know, when the fire marshal comes in to do a fire safety drill assembly, that would be your large assembly space. And then the auditorium is, again, we're not choosing to build another auditorium. We would just keep it the way it is now. You could renovate that, but your seating capacity would be essentially the same that you have now. That's a fine size auditorium for a middle school. Not to say it couldn't be bigger. But oftentimes that's nice for back to school night or nice for a smaller presentation. If the 7th and 8th grade band was going to do a big concert, maybe they're practicing there and then the concert actually happens at the high school, because your auditorium at the high school is beautiful. So the idea, at least the thinking in the renovation of that, was the auditorium would kind of stay where it is and that size. It could be fixed up, but it wouldn't gain any additional space.
Okay, Dr. Schaefer, I think maybe it'd be a good idea to let the public make comments on their presentation, although
I don't know if there's
we're a little bit
anybody
out of agenda,
that's
but are there any
public.
questions from the public?
Leanne, you have your hand up? Oh, I'm sorry, you're on your phone. You're on your phone. You want to repeat what Warren said?
Okay. Dr. Schaefer?
All right, I guess we're going to segue now to PFM.
Mike, thank you very much.
Mike,
That was
thanks.
very,
Thanks,
very
Mike.
helpful.
Intermission or? Okay, so we'll hop into this, so thank you. It's good to see everybody. I think the last time we were here was in July when we were talking about financing the $1 million worth of safety improvements and other various projects around the district. And since then, you have Dave Payne here from PNC Capital Markets. He's been the district's underwriter for many years. Obviously, you know Jim and Dr. Schaefer and the PFM team. We've been going back and forth with different cost estimates, different debt structures. Interest rates have been moving around, and we've used your Forecast 5 model, which Jim puts together and can run lots of various forecasts about what the operating budget's going to look like, going out 5 and 10 years. And we've tried to marry all these things together into an affordability analysis of some of these numbers. Okay. Now, the numbers that we looked at were very specific on which building and exactly how much it's going to cost. And I know those are still estimates. What we did in here was we kind of took more general numbers. So we have 2 options for $50 million worth of projects, and we have 1 option for $80 million worth of projects. And you're going to look at this. There's 6 pages. They all kind of read the same, so we'll walk through them. And believe it or not, this is the summary version of all these numbers, okay? And we actually did get rid of a few options just because, once we got up into the 80s and then we had some $120 million options, those just didn't look affordable at this time. Now, maybe over many years, over a 15-year period, you might be able to do, $120 million projects. But right now, we're kind of looking at, over the next 5 years, what can you tackle? Okay? So that's what we'll walk through. Feel free to ask questions while we're talking. I feel like that might be more useful for the financing part of this rather than wait until the end. Real quickly on page 2, so we have an interest rate chart. Now, this chart's not meant to say where Abington Heights would borrow if we went out today. This is meant to be kind of a bellwether of the municipal market, okay? Because the district can borrow tax exempt, which is better than taxable interest rates. So that's an advantage that the school district has. we look at what's called the 10-year MMD, or the 10-year B-val rate. And when you look in this middle chart, okay, you can see, down here where the all-time lows were during COVID, and then as Mike said, between cost spiking, inflation, and interest rates spiking, we're kind of in this new red box here, which it's much higher than the all-time lows, okay? But when you look at it over the past 15 or 20 years, we're actually kind of back to averages, right? So, we've priced a number of school district bonds this week going out 30 years, and the all-in interest rates on those, ranged between a 4.75 and a 5% for 30-year money. So just as a gauge, that's kind of where borrowing rates over 30 years are right now for a school project, okay? If we flip to page 3, this is your existing debt, which, as you know, you don't really have very much. So you got, at the top half, you have your gross debt service. Column 2 is your 2015 bonds, which only have a few years left. I think you've even been paying those off a little bit early. Column 3 is the 2023 note, which we just did, 3 months ago. So at the end of the day, you have in your budget about $750,000, let's call it, of debt service. So that's kind of your starting point, right? So when a school has that in the budget, then when we add debt on top of that, you're going to need to raise your debt service numbers from 750 up to whatever the new bogey is. So that's what we'll show you here in a second. But so because the debt pays off in 2028, you have that advantage of the debt falling off. So you're going to keep that in place, but you're going to build on that with the new debt. Okay? So that's kind of an important concept. And then real quick on page 4, we won't go through this in grave detail because I know we want to get to the numbers. But as we talked about before, we're going to hit on $50 million and $80 million. And this is all married to the Forecast 5 projections, which help really make it, I think, useful to understand how you can afford it, as opposed to just looking at the cost of the debt service, because you have operating costs that go up every year, right? So we've kind of put that all together. Under item 2, and I don't think this will be an issue because we just heard Mike talk, but we always like to tell our clients, when you borrow money tax exempt, right, you have to follow federal tax laws. And the thought is that you're going to spend 85% of that money within about 3 years. Okay, so if we think the projects are going to take place over 6 years, we're not going to go out and borrow $80 million today and then have it sit around as you spend it over 6 years. So part of the borrowing plan is timing things with the construction draws, right? So you got to pay attention to market conditions, but then you also want to pay attention to, well, how fast are we going to spend the money? Okay, and you'll see that as we go through this. And then go down to where it says reimbursement resolution in the gray bar. I think that one's important. Another thing we like to tell our clients, and I think Dave would agree, is you can put together a simple 1 or 2 pager. It's called a reimbursement resolution. You can put that in place at one of your future board meetings. And what it does is it allows you to reimburse the general fund in the future with borrowed proceeds, if you would like to, for expenses related to the project. So you don't have to use it, but it looks backwards 60 days. So if you put it in place tonight, it would go backwards 60 days and forward through the project. And it's just a way to, potentially be able to reimburse yourself. If we borrow money in 2025 and you spend $300,000 on something, then you would like to put that back in the general fund. It allows you to do that. Okay, and that's something, if you're interested, we can work with bond counsel on that, and we can have something for you. Okay, so who wants to look at the numbers? Probably nobody, because they're big, but I think this shook out to be better news than, I think what we were picturing in our head as far as the affordability part of it. Okay. So like I said, there's 2 pages per option. They each read the same. So let's walk through the first one kind of in more detail, and then the other 2 will be a little bit faster. So when you look at page 6, all right, you start in column 7. That's your existing debt service, right? And so what we did was we broke this into 4 steps. Now, will this really be 4 steps if you decide to borrow $50 million? I don't know yet. But this, for simplicity purposes, that's kind of what we came up with. And step 1 assumes that we're going to do the first borrowing in January of 2027, and there's a reason for that. So if you look at the top part where it says scenario 1, $50 million, this scenario 1 assumes that we maintain the ESSER and the ARP expenditures. Okay, so what we did was we actually pushed the borrowing back a little bit further in order to make it fit the affordability analysis that we'll show you on the next page. And then so what we did was we borrowed each year for 4 years, And you can see the borrowing amounts. It's 10 million in 27, 10 million in 28, 20 million in 29, and about $8.5 million in 2030. Now, again, don't get wed to those are the right borrowing amounts. It's just kind of how we shook this out. Once we would get a real draw schedule and we'd, get this planned in more detail, we'd figure out exactly what this would look like. But so essentially what you're doing is you're borrowing about $48 million over that 4-year period. If you're looking in column 5 in the orange, we're assuming there's going to be about $2.4 million that you put aside in a capital reserve, and we'll explain that on the next page. So you're going to have, about $50 million for the projects, okay? Now, if we go down to columns 8, 9, 10, and 11 and the different colors there, what we do is we start to phase the debt in after your existing debt falls off, okay? So when you see column 7, the debt kind of goes away. The new debt in column 8 comes online. These borrowings run out 30 years, which is about that's the maximum that we would be able to borrow for a building project. So each one of these goes 30 years from when you issue it, okay? And then so when we get all the way over to column 14, when all the dust settles, you'll have $50 million for the projects. It's 2030, and your debt service went from column 7, about $750,000, to column 14, running at about $195 million. Okay, so that's what you have to fit into your budget between now and 2030, when this is all phased in. All right. Now, columns 12 and 13 are blank. Okay, those are columns that we would fill in more detail as this came along, but those columns would hopefully be things that would help reduce the cost of the project. Okay, so in column 13, we have indirect cost savings. So if we decide that because of these projects, you're going to save $100,000 a year on something, we can put that in here to help offset the debt service if it doesn't get sucked back into the budget. So we want to leave a placeholder for that. Column 12, where it says capitalized interest or cash, that's where you can use district cash to help offset the debt service. Okay, so if you decide that this is what you wanted to do, but we needed to accelerate the borrowing timeline, for example, well, you can't necessarily fit it into your budget because you just can't afford it. Well, there's something called capitalized interest, or you can use your own cash to help bridge yourself until it does fit into your budget. So that's a column, again, that we would fill in kind of further down the road once we know more about the timing and the projects. But the takeaway is you have to get to column 14, which when you see, if you look in column 17, the cumulative increase, you're going to be adding about $2.44 million to your debt service. That's what the total cost is right now. The interest rates we have in here are a little bit conservative. We would hit the market at different times over a multi-year period. So, one time you'll hit the market a little bit higher, another time you'll hit it a little bit lower. That's, typically how it works. We can accelerate projects or borrowings if we think the market's great and we think we can afford it. Those are all kind of flexibilities that are built within this. But this is just meant to be kind of a roadmap to how this could play out as you move forward with the borrowing plan. So, questions about this page? Yes, sir.
Columns 15, 16, and 17 only have numbers in it for 4 years. It doesn't carry through the rest of the third year.
Well, so the way that would work is, you're gonna go from column 7 to column 14. Once you get your new debt service run rate up to that, $3.2 million, now the cost is still there every year, but you're not increasing your millage in order to pay for the project. So you'll have the debt service phased in. Now, that's not to say that there wouldn't be other increases for operational things or other projects, so this specifically for this $50 million, that's what we're referring to.
So you said your rates are conservative, but what rates are you assuming for step 1, 2, 3, and 4?
So when you issue municipal bonds, every maturity has its own fixed interest rate. But if somebody said, versus a mortgage where you get a 5% mortgage rate or 6% mortgage rate. So if somebody said, what's the all-in rate of these? These are about a 5.25.
And they're flat?
And we left that assumption the same for.
And it's 30-year financing?
Correct.
And is 30-year the max?
30 years the max.
30 years the max.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, my only other question for now, so when you do step 1 and you draw that, you're exposed to interest rate risk, for good or for bad, for the future draws, correct? You're not locking any of these future draws?
Correct. So January 2027, we lock in interest rates on step 1, rate risk is over. right? So the bonds are fixed for the life. The only thing that we can do in the future is we could refinance it or pay it off, but the interest rates will not go up, okay? But you still have risk for steps 2 through 4 because we haven't gotten there. So you're not locking those rates until we get to 28, 29, or 30.
And you can't, what's the call?
So the call feature is, if it's 10 million or less, it has a 5-year call feature.
So you're locked for 5 years.
So
no
you're
matter
locked
what.
for 5 years before you can refinance it. If it's above 10 million, then it's typically an 8 to a 10-year call feature, depending on the market. So you will notice as you look at these plans, if we can borrow $10 million and if it makes sense with the project draws, there's an advantage to that because you get the shorter call feature and you typically get a better interest rate.
So and I don't know if you make this recommendation or not, but would you recommend, given short-term rates right now are really high,
Right.
instead of being, if you don't lock these rates, you could also benefit if rates drop, right?
Correct.
But we're in the risk business of, starting projects and then getting hamstrung because rates go higher, which they could.
Right. It could go up.
Hopefully
to-
they won't, but look at your charts, right? We're nowhere near the,
No.
we're in the
They
middle,
could- they could
right?
certainly go
They
higher.
could certainly go higher.
Yeah.
So, is it reasonable that if you project out that you're within, what's the limit, 3 years, you have to have 85% spent? Like, once we get to a point where we feel like we're within that time frame, if rates are where they are right now, wouldn't you just draw it all?
Well, we
and
we
lock
could
it?
do that, but the problem is if you borrow 40 million in 2027, you have to pay interest on 40 million in 2027.
Right, but you can reinvest the proceeds while it's not being
You-
constructed into
you
T-bills
can.
at 5.5, right? Like,
Correct,
you're
you
allowed to
can.
do that?
You're allowed to do that as long as you meet certain spend down requirements, so that would
Right.
be a positive arbitrage.
Right.
So you can do that, but you still would need to make sure that you can fit it into your debt service budget,
Right.
which is what the next page will kind of show us. So,
Gotcha.
and that's kind of what I mean, this is just a roadmap. If we pick 50 million, I'll bet you $20 that this is not exactly what it looks like, and we will be flexible. And every time we come back to a meeting, we'll always be evaluating, should we do something different? It's never set in stone until the project's complete.
Right.
Yeah.
So, question with the 2.4 million in the estimated district funds, how do you get that?
We'll review that real quickly on the next page.
To piggyback off of Mr. Azar's comment, if for something happens that interest rates go down, we could combine 2 of these steps
Yeah.
and get a lower, and lock into a lower interest rate.
Mhm.
And,
But
and
that comes with risks of, hey, you
Yeah.
gotta spend the money and things
Right.
like that.
Right.
But we have those options.
we do. I mean, you can, there's plenty of times when we go borrow all the money at once.
Right.
Or you break it out into multiple pieces. It all just kind of depends on the individual situation and, how things are evolving.
I mean, normally when you're doing construction financing, you're talking about negative arbitrage, not
Right.
like we have the potential today. I don't know how long it'll last. I hope it doesn't last that long, actually, but
Yeah, and then there's other situations where you get out of this positive arbitrage environment that we're in, and, these are usually bad news articles, but, somebody goes and borrows all the money before they're really ready, before
Yeah.
they get bids back.
Right.
They get bids back, and the project costs 70 million, not 50, and now they're trying to decide, well, what are we gonna do? Well, you already borrowed the money.
Right.
So even though it's sitting there maybe earning something, you're also paying debt service on it, the clock's ticking, you got decisions to make. So you just kind of got to weigh all these different pros and cons. But all good points. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, so this is the real page now that, shows you, how, can we afford this? So a couple different boxes here. So when you look in the top left-hand corner, it shows the assumed tax increase, which was put into the Forecast 5 model, okay? So you can see it assumes, full index of 6.2% in the 25-year. Then you follow up with 4 years of a 4%, which we don't know exactly what those years will be, but that's what the assumption is. It'll still be sort of high. And then it tails off with a 2.5% increase, out through 2032, okay? So when you look down below that, you see what the revenues are over that same period, assuming those increases, all right? And so the revenues continue to grow. Now, column 3 shows the expenses. So obviously, the expenses are also growing, right, every year on an operating standpoint. But then what we did was we gave Jim, the debt service numbers from the previous page, and you put them into the model, so column 3's expenses also include the debt service that we just talked about coming online. And what it's telling you is in column 4, can you afford that $50 million under the maintaining ESSER scenario? And it shows in 2026, you do have a deficit of about 140,000. Now, that's something that we can work through if this is what we wanted to do. And then the following 3 years, you do actually have a bit of a surplus. That surplus is what we're taking, and we're saying you're going to put that into a capital reserve so you can then borrow less money through the project. So the 2.4 million that, I'm sorry, the woman on the phone, I don't remember your name, but that you were talking about, that's coming from this projection, okay?
I see. Okay, thank you.
But then you get to 2030, and you start to see that with the new debt service being fully phased in, because that happens right about 2030, that's when you get to that $3.2 million new debt service run rate, plus, whatever operating expenses increases are built into the model, you can see this starts to become a little unwieldy on the long end, okay? Now, you can obviously have different tax increases in the upper left-hand corner. You can change expenses. There's other things you can do. But the way that this is set up now under these assumptions, it looks like you can kind of afford it, but you'd have to stay on top of it and make some changes as you go in order to kind of continue to be able to pay the debt service and meet budget expectations out in 2031, 2, and 3. So is that?
This does not include any thought of using the current reserve.
So it does not include any reserves for borrowing other than the 2.4 million. As far as the district's reserves, I'd have to defer to Jim if any of that's built into the assumption somewhere.
There is no built-in use of the reserves, other than when you incur a deficit, you would use your general fund reserve to spend down on operating.
So at this point in time, our current capital reserve is approximately how much?
About 5.3 million.
Theoretically, then, we're starting with about $5.3 million. Under this scenario, we're going to end up with possibly $5.3 million.
Yes, you would,
Unless
under
we
this
cover-
scenario.
Unless we cover the deficits out of
Yes,
capital.
your reserve is there to start and your reserve is there to finish under the scenario.
In that scenario, theoretically, our fiscal position is as stable then as it would be now.
Except,
We have more debt.
The numbers you're seeing here on that chart that say are negative, that would come out of the general fund balance, not the capital
Quite.
fund. You can't, the capital fund can't use that.
What's the general fund balance on that?
About 11, to start the year, we're valuing where
Like 16.
Well, combined.
Yeah, yeah.
But the capital fund you can only use for.
Correct.
So.
What I'm really thinking
Right.
is fund balances. And my point is only that under these scenarios, our fund balances are going to be relatively stable, which is a very good.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Okay, so that's, I'm sorry, go ahead. So that's scenario 1. So everybody's good with how the page reads. We'll do the next ones quicker because I know we have a lot to talk about. So then if you flip to the next page, go to page 9, scenario 1B, it's the same $50 million, okay? This assumes that you are going to reduce some of the ESSER expenditures that you have, okay? So you'll see it's more affordable on the following page. The only thing that's different about the borrowing page on page 9 is we do accelerate the borrowings up a year. So your first borrowing is January of 26 instead of 27. Okay, and that's just because it fits into the affordability analysis without going negative, all right? So just skip to the affordability page, so page 10, go right to column 4, all the other assumptions are the same. When you go to page 4, you can see, the annual surplus deficit looks a lot different, right? So you have larger surpluses in the up years. Again, we're assuming you take some of that money, put it in a capital reserve, then you borrow less in the last step of the borrowing. You do still start to kind of go negative out on the long end. Now, again, that is 10 years away, and there's, lots of operating assumptions that you can make about what happens 10 years from now. But the bottom line is looks a little bit better. Yes, sir.
So am I correct that you laid this out so that we wouldn't have deficits? Correct?
No,
So like,
it's not tied exactly to what the deficits look like. So we kind of kept the borrowing plan of doing 10 million, 10 million, 20 million, and then 8 million over a 4-year period. And it fits within this, and with that debt service included, you're still spinning off a surplus.
right.
So that's net of the debt service is what column 4 is showing.
But if I remember correctly from a meeting that we had, and Mr. Payne was at that meeting, there is a way to, if you want to accelerate the projects, there is a way to utilize, not that we're going to do this for sure, or by any stretch, but
Right.
you can utilize reserve funds to bridge you to.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure. So if you go back to page 9 and look in column 12. So I think this is kind of what I was hitting on earlier. There's 2 ways to help bridge yourself if you want to speed up the project, but you can't fit it into your budget, right away. It's going to take you 2 or 3 years. The first one is called capitalized interest, where you actually borrow extra money to make some of the interest payments while you're phasing in the debt service into the budget. Okay? If you have cash, if you have reserve funds, and enough that you're comfortable, typically you want to skip capitalized interest because that costs you money, right? And you would use your cash to help make the payment. So if the payment next year was $500,000, but you couldn't fit that in your budget, you would then take $500,000 from the reserve fund, use that to make the debt payment, and then the following year, you would be able to fit it into your budget hypothetically, or 2 years from now.
So let me know if I'm oversimplifying this, because when I take a look at both scenarios, the difference is almost 1 year, right? So under the best of circumstances here, the one we just reviewed, that has a draw, the first one, of January of '26, right?
Correct.
So if we are just speaking in the hypothetical here in the rosiest of rosy, and I'll piggyback with what Rod said, say if there's a way to bridge it, right? So if the board hypothetically said, hey, you know what, we want to approve something right now, right? And we're on the rosiest of scenarios here, then this January of '26, right? We want to fast forward it 1 year to
2025.
January '25.
Yep.
Okay? And then we say we're going to use our reserves to pay the soft costs to KCBA, and they'll start January of '24 and do the planning, and then that acts as the bridge.
Correct. And so we could, if you voted tonight, we want to do option 1, and we want to speed up the process, and Mike says, yeah, we can get it done, you need to have your first borrowing, you need the first 10 million January of '25, we could figure out how to make that work with a combination of reserves and the debt service.
But what we couldn't do, and this is probably for Jens, is because the reimbursement resolution, which we did on our loan, only looks back 60 days. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it like a year back.
So just to put like a wrapper around that topic, the reason not to do that is it costs more, right? Because capitalized interest is additional cost.
If you do the borrowed capitalized interest version.
Correct.
If you use the cash version, it's not costing you anything other than the opportunity cost of that money being invested.
Right, but that's meaningful. I
Right
mean,
now,
at
that is
5%
meaningful.
right now, it usually, like 2 years ago, was nothing, right?
Correct,
But now
right.
it's something.
Yep.
So not doing stuff faster, doing stuff faster is going to cost us more. But not necessarily, because doing stuff slower exposes you to market risk.
So you have market risk, and you have what I think Mike was talking about, which.
Higher cost of doing
Right.
Higher cost of borrowing. So
Yeah.
and nobody has a crystal ball, right? So some people think rates are going down, some people think they're going up. If they go up, it's not like we have a ton of extra cash flow here. We've been struggling for a long time now to try to figure out how to generate surplus cash flow to do this stuff. And one of the biggest risks as we move forward is not, okay, is it going to cost us more money if we do it this way? It's, well, what if rates rise? Like, we could be in a position where we can't do it. and we have to wait. You know, if we were in a position where you have lots of, you know, some school districts have, right? If you rewind the clock, you had a lot of things, you know, tailwinds, really low interest rates, right? Inflation hadn't happened yet. Like, we have a lot of headwinds that could
The
cause.
reverse of that is the money we are investing at that 5% interest, that could go down, which doesn't mean that we're going to invest that money anymore.
Correct.
You know, so those are the kind of like
Yep.
balancing
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're going to have to do and keep an eye on the market.
And
is
again,
what
the
comes.
construction costs are
Yeah,
gonna go up.
yeah, I was about to say, what's worse in your, like, so
I think
from 20 to
construction-
23, the construction costs have gone up 46%, from the 242 per square foot to 400 right now. You know, is it better to bet on that number than, say, like?
Well, I mean, I
Yeah,
would.
I was just curious, yeah.
I think it's a pretty, you know, short leap of faith to say that the bigger risks are rising construction costs and rising rates versus, okay, maybe we have to spend a little bit more to do this faster. You know, that's,
Yeah, the construction costs.
They're big risks.
Having sitting at these meetings every week and listening to Mike and his colleagues, that makes me nervous. The saving grace on the interest rates going up is that you will refinance these. You know, there's not any Pennsylvania school district bonds in the state that haven't been refinanced one or more times. I think Dave would agree with me. Just the way that municipal bonds work and the yield curve works, we will get another bite at these. But if the costs go up, you know, the costs just go up on Mike's side. You know, you can't.
The worst thing, in my mind, that could happen here is you commit to the project, and you get into year 3, and your construction costs now have again increased 20%, and suddenly you can't finish the project.
Yeah.
So now you're financing something far less than you needed, and you put yourself in a worse position. You haven't solved any problems.
yeah.
Mike, when you go out and look for the contractor, are you locking in is it fixed or is it variable?
No, it's fixed. So
Okay, so,
in that scenario, let's say it's a 2-year-long project. When the bids come in, that's how much it costs. So they can't come back, although they do sometimes. They go, hey, interest rates and things cost more. Hey, that's the number you gave us. So over those 2 years, that's all we got. So you know the cost of the project on bid day. The challenges that you're moving up to it, borrowing ahead of time, planning for all those things. We're always pretty good within 5%. As things have been growing, we know, even the latest elementary school in Northampton, we knew where that was going to be. We knew it was rising. So before it went out to bid, before they started borrowing money, we knew pretty good within 5% or so of the budget of how much that was going to come in at. So all of these things are, yes, that's what I want to do, let's get started. There's a year of planning, a year of estimates, a year of watching how the markets are going up and down, and sometimes it extends a little bit longer, sometimes it speeds up. The drawings and all of the approvals are all the things you need to put a shovel in the ground. Sometimes we do these jobs and then it sits for 6 months. But everything's ready to go. You have a shovel-ready job. That's the definition of shovel-ready. It's ready to go, but it just waits until an interest rate or a construction cost or something like that comes in. So it's a plan, and then you have to react during that year of planning if anything changes.
Yes, and that's no different than the colored page. It's a plan that we will absolutely evolve as this, you know, timeline evolves, like I said. The other thing we don't have built into this, just because it's too preliminary, is, you know, when Mike gets us the draw schedule of how to spend the $50 million, right, the money that you borrow is going to be invested. It's going to earn right now 5.5%, and that may go down or go up. But those interest earnings will then also be used to downsize the project. You know, so if we earn $1.5 million or $2 million over a 3-year period of investing, then at the end of the day, instead of borrowing $48 million, we'll borrow $45 million, which again just decreases the cost. You know, the whole goal here is to set up a plan, to move forward with it, but then to constantly figure out ways to, you know, shrink how much this costs. Okay, so last page. So scenario 2 this is for $80 million, so I'm on page number 12, the colored page. Okay, so here we're borrowing more money, obviously, right? So if you just skip right to column 16, you're gonna have to get your debt service number up to about, you know, just shy of 5.2 million now. So instead of 3.2 million, you're up to 5.2 million. All right, so that's a $4.4 million increase. Here we spread it out a little bit further, so we have a 5-step plan instead of a 4-step plan. Again, don't get too married to what it shows now, but that's, something that we'll think about. So then if we skip to page 13, and we go right to column 4, okay, we're showing, annual surplus deficits where, for the first few years, this does look affordable, but then again, the increases in operational expenses out that far, plus the new phased-in debt service does start to produce deficits. Okay, so if you did go forward with this plan, it would be another scenario where, you just have to stay on top of this over the years. And every year you'd have to, really evaluate what you want to do in order to kind of make it through that debt service plan, over the long term. This scenario 2 does assume the ESSER reductions. Okay, when we ran this scenario without the ESSER reductions, it started to become it's not feasible at the moment. And then the $120 million plans that we ran, there was no reason to show you those.
So that's the Powerball plan.
It's the Powerball plan.
So basically, though.
That's the 2% interest rate.
You could start out with a $50 million plan and get 3 years down and say, hey, things are going better, interest rates have dropped.
Sure.
Let's segue to the $80 million plan because of the way you've laid this out.
Yes, you could. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when Mike starts getting bids that come back 10% less than what he estimated, but no, that's exactly right. Again, the plan is just meant to be framework, and it's going to change as you move through it.
It doesn't matter which page, but let's just say page 13, the assumed tax increase, that only covers the investment costs of the project. It doesn't include, like, if we needed to increase taxes for just general expenses.
Well, I think it does,
No,
but
it does.
maybe I'll
It
just
does.
turn
It
to
does?
Jim.
Yeah, it
Okay.
does.
Yeah, it does.
You split it.
So, I think your question hits at the significant work we did together in trying to marrying the debt plan to the operational budget. So yes, these tax increases are going toward the general fund budget, of which the debt service will be coming out of. So this is a holistic view, assuming these are good estimates going forward. This is a holistic view of what you can expect from a surplus and deficit perspective going out through 2033 in each scenario.
And I think in your model, just to expand on that, in your model, you have increases for, the various line items of just your regular operating budget as well as.
We do. For example, we take our biggest line item, professional staff. We took a look at what historically, we know we have 3% in the contract right now, but then we took a look at historically what that translated to when people turn over and, they get more educational credits, and we landed on 2.25%. So a little bit lower of an increase. Now, we know on the support staff side, it's 3%, they all make the same, and they're all moving up. So that was a fair assumption to say 3% is the assumption going forward. So we really, I think these guys were asking, is this a conservative, is this an aggressive sort of forecast? And to me, it's just it's as down the middle as I can call it. It doesn't call for a recession, it doesn't call for a boom or bust. It's just sort of taking historical averages on a straight line type of approach, and just kind of taking us forward. So there are no sort of radical ideas in this forecast. It's really just a modest, practical, middle-of-the-road forecast.
I guess the last note on the page is likely that additional mills will be required to fund ongoing operational expenses. It led me to believe that this did not include it, so maybe that needs to be clarified.
Okay.
That the assumed tax increase includes, operational expenses, increases in operational expenses for that, an estimate of it. So, you may want to put that in.
Sure, no, I understand. Point taken. Was this helpful?
Yeah, it's great.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Just one question, in listening to the conversation and interest rates,
Something that is very easy to do as you move forward on this project. Obviously, the communication you've done is paramount. You're going to need to continue to communicate as the markets change. But when you're looking at $50 million total, or $80 million, and you're looking at $10 million tranches, back of the envelope, 1% interest rate rise or fall on $10 million in the early years of covering the debt service is $100,000. 1% rise or fall on $50 million is $500,000 a year in debt service in the early years. And 1% rise or fall on $80 million is a potential $800,000 decrease if rates drop 1%, or you would have to deal with the increase if they rise. As Zach said, we're relatively high in terms of the last 5 to 10 years. 5, 6 years ago, borrowings were going off at 2.5%, 3% for 30-year money. I'm not saying we're going there, but we are at a higher level than we've been at in the last 5 years. So staying in touch with the architect and the cost of materials and labor, and also keeping your eye on that interest rate market. It is going to fluctuate, and perhaps it'll go up 1 year on your first borrowing and down 1 year on your next borrowing and even out. But just continuing to communicate, keeping your eye on the economic forecast and where interest rates are going, are, I think, hopefully going to be a help to you down the road, because we are near the high that we've been at in the last 10 years.
And that's something that, when Dave says, keep an eye on it, I mean, we'll be doing that for you. So if you start to move forward with the plan, I mean, that's what we'll come tell you. You know, all of a sudden, you know, we want to borrow 20 million next year, not 8, because rates are a % better, and look what this new debt service looks like, and look what your affordability analysis looks like if we do it that way. So any other questions? I know we took up a lot of time.
No, this is really helpful.
Any questions from the public? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
I call it closing the learning loop.
Okay, Dr. Schaefer, on to personnel.
Well, I think we got to approve the treasurer and bills
Oh,
report.
I
This
did
is
it
maybe the
again.
last time. We could never forget that.
I was hoping you would. Anyway, we started the month of October with cash available of $29,260,275. We did have monthly revenues of $5,950,603, with almost $3 million being of real estate taxes. Our net disbursements were only $4,587,572, which leaves us with a cash balance moving forward in November of $30,623,306.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vidansky.
You're welcome very much, Mr. Acker.
Thank you very much for your time as treasurer.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Schaefer.
No, we need a motion
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
on the treasurer's.
Thank you. We are wizards on the Robert's rules again.
The date you want to get out?
So moved.
Yeah. Okay, any questions on the treasurer's report?
I don't have a question, I just want to compliment Mr. Rademski and thank him again for his service as treasurer of our board for how many years, Greg? 8 years, 10 years?
12. Oh, as treasurer? Oh, I don't know.
Congratulations, 12 years. Thank you again, Greg.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask that the board consider a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second. Questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the November 2023 volunteer list.
So moved.
Second.
Questions on the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Mordensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney. Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the clinical education experience agreement with Misericordia to provide CHSE students with additional training, education, and practical experience.
So moved.
Second.
Questions on the motion?
Roll
Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney. Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Mordensky,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the updated Abington Heights School District organizational chart. There's nothing crazy in this now that Jim is contracting with us and we have a new director of building and grounds. We adjusted that and are publishing that, have to approve it, and then we'll be able to provide this to our new board members coming on.
So moved.
Second.
Questions on the motion? Roll call?
Mrs. Tierney. Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Mordensky.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Prior to reading this next one, because it came up before, it's a wellness policy, I got some more information. Ms. Karam was a member of a group that sat in on this. This one kind of sits outside of some other policies, so there's some statutory types of things that we have to do, making sure that we don't get fined and make sure we get our money. So if a lot of this, we're just obligated to have, so this is the first reading of the policy.
So
I-
moved. Second.
Questions on the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Mordensky.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney. Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to enter into an agreement with EduConsult Consulting for grant acquisition and advocacy service for a 24-month period as we look for grants to help us achieve some of our goals we have, whether that's facilities and programming.
So moved.
Second.
Questions on the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Mordensky.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Mrs. Tierney?
Mr. Abdullah.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, the next portion of our agenda is informational meeting listing the use of our facilities. And then we follow that with any unfinished business.
Mr. Acker, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I did approve yes to the last one,
Yes.
did I?
Yes.
Did you get me? Okay. And then I do have a question on facility usage. The very last one, the Abington Gators, there's swimming and there's no charge. Haven't we always received funds from them in the past?
Yes, so what I have done is exactly what was done in the past. So we charge the Gators for using our facility on a daily basis for practice. And for these, I think it's 3 meets, we don't charge them.
I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
I see. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought this was.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just for, I think,
Oh,
3
okay.
meets, yeah. Yep.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, new business, I would like to that Mr. Fleming and Mr. Novensky, we appreciate your years of service to the Abington Heights School Board. This school board is really a very pleased group, very friendly. We argue, we fight, but I think everyone on this board is focused on the children in this district and our community. And I think both of you exemplify and have, and we will miss you. Thank you very much for your service.
I think we have a special guest who would also like to make a comment under new business.
Yes.
You didn't think you'd get away with this one. So good evening, everyone. My name is Laurie Fleming, and yes, I am Michael's wife at South Abington Township. I could not let this evening pass without this personal public comment. As you retire, Michael, when Michael was asked to consider running for a seat on the Abington Heights School Board, little did we know his service would last these 12 years. But here we are, closing this chapter tonight after those 12 years. We tell our adult boys now that when they were growing up and would be angry with us because we would not allow them to do something, or because we would make them come home to eat dinner together with us, or be home at an earlier time of night than their friends, our decisions were made out of love. Our decisions were made out of love, and not so with their best interest at heart, doing what we felt was best at the time with the knowledge that we had. Not all of our decisions and actions were right, and not all were wrong. Not all of our decisions, again, they were not right and they were not wrong. But like parenting, I can honestly say Michael's service never had a personal agenda. With every action or vote, he had the best interest of the students, the teachers, the staff, the administrators, the community, and the taxpayers in mind. He never took advantage of his position, always paying his way to see an athletic event, a play, or a concert. Well, once, when we went to the first night football game at the high school, arriving just after halftime, he felt uncomfortable, realizing that we did not have any cash on us, and he sheepishly played the school board director card. His one act of selfishness was actually his first official act as a school board director, surprising his twin boys by handing them their high school diplomas. In the photos, you can feel the pride Michael had at that moment and the surprise and the love on the twins' faces. I mention all this because Michael was a faithful elected official, and I know over the next few months he will miss this, and come the first and the third Wednesday of the month, he will stop and think, oh wait, I don't have a school board meeting to run to now. Now what? Well, as you and we close this chapter, a new beginning and a new chapter is being opened, and I will be happy to have you home for dinner on the first and the third Wednesdays of the month. I'm confident that you and we will fill the time that you gave the Abington Heights in other meaningful ways, as that is just us and how we were brought up. I close with a few messages from those important to you, Michael, but could not be here tonight. From your parents. They love you and are proud of your dedication and of your service. From Connor and Aaron. They stated that while growing up, they always looked up to your sense of volunteerism and community service and your dedication to the community and to the future of Abington Heights students. And they thank you for leading by example. And if Monsignor McGarry were still with us, you know that he would insist, as he always was, in asking me, did you serve him that breakfast in bed for he retired as an elected official? Because you know all elected officials deserve breakfast in beds. So take note to all of that, you. But Michael's still waiting for that breakfast. I am proud of you, proud of the example that you have set for our boys. I love you, and I, along with your other family and friends, thank you. And to all of you, the best to the rest of you and the new directors coming in the board as well. I pray that you continue to always do what is best for all in the Abington Heights community. Thank you.
Don't quite go away. Thank you for coming, because service on this board really requires more than one. And you obviously have been the best example of the spouse of a board member and seeing us through the challenges, the meetings where you want to pull your hair out and jump out the window. And I know there are times where my wife would say when I would come home, she would immediately jump up and run into the bedroom, get under the covers and pretend she was asleep because she didn't want to hear what happened. So thank you very much for everything you do. And Greg, the same goes to Karen. Thank you. Okay.
So, Mr. Eckert, just a couple things, because I've served with these guys for a little bit. You know, Greg, it's been an honor to serve with you. And I think what Greg always brought to the table, and he actually did it today, and that is, you know, having the taxpayers' mind at interest. And he's done it consistently over a number of years, and, you know, using other people's money to invest in valuable services. Greg takes that very seriously, and you should be commended for it. But also not just the money part of it, but also the quality. I know you're a quality guy, and every process that we have, there's always a quality question that comes up, and rightfully so. So thank you for your service. And for Mike, you're not done yet either. The one thing I got from you, Mike, which is, I think, critical, especially for school board members, is your ability to critically think. What you've shown over the last 8 years, and I was very impressed with, is your ability to challenge assumptions. There's a lot of things that we go into, especially with different decision-making, and we just assume things. And Mike would always take a step back and actually challenge some of the basic assumptions that go into some of these decisions that we make. And also your reasoning through logic. I think you do a very good job at that. You've done it consistently, you know, for 12 years, and that's pretty impressive. And then finally, I think another third thing of critical thinking is diversity of thought. And it kind of ties into the other two, but, you know, we're here in the demographics that we are at Abington Heights, and you bring truly diversity of thought. So you're worried about different demographics of people that may be underserved, and I've seen that many, many times. So you've done a great job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose.
Okay.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Paul.